Welcome to Rooting for You, a seasonal gardening podcast for non-experts. I'm Tess, and I know nothing.
And I'm Alyce, and I know some things.
Each week we'll chat about one gardening topic and then discuss the effort-reward payoff by asking, is the juice worth the squeeze? Just a heads up, there might be a bit of swearing in this episode. You've been warned. Today we're talking about slugs and snails. Now, I recently had a number of my Brussels sprouts decimated by caterpillars, so I know firsthand that creatures in the garden can be small but mighty, leaving a trail of destruction behind them as they go. Truth be told, I don't even know where to start when it comes to tackling these garden foes, so we are in desperate need of a slugs and snails conversation. So Alyce, starting with the basics, what are the early warning signs that you have a slugs or snails problem on your hands?
Well, as you say, it is going to be that your seedlings, usually seedlings, have been absolutely demolished. And the real problem with slugs and snails is that they will pretty much eat any seedling that's a nice tender leaf. Something like the caterpillars that we've talked about before, I mean, they're, quite a fan of the brassicas, that kind of thing. Slugs and snails, they don't care. If it's a tender young plant, they are going to absolutely smash it.
They're interested.
So that makes them, I think, one of the biggest, most pervasive garden pests that everyone's going to deal with, because no matter what type of crop you've grown, you probably have encountered slugs and snails. So I've been growing some corn salad at the moment, and I was all excited. Corn salad, maiche, that like kind of soft salady green.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit fancy.
Oh, nice one.
Very nice. Yeah, I put some corn salad seeds in. Really excited about those, and they all started coming up, and then like a week later they were gone, like flat gone.
Those jerks.
I was dirty. I was really upset by it. So, it is one of those things that when you've got young plants, seeds, seedlings, in those early stages, you have to be watching for this, especially in the colder months like at the moment, because it can go from a beautiful patch of germinated seeds to nothing. Now, that's a pretty extreme situation, but it does happen.
Yeah, and so one of the questions that I was wondering about is when you first notice something, how long do you have to act? Like, can you wait until the week?
There's no waiting. When it comes to slugs and snails, you need to go for it. The younger the plant, the more susceptible they will be to damage. Plants will get to a point when they are big enough that, a slug and a snail can take a few chomps out of it, like your silver beet. No one's going to care. It's not a problem. When they're young, like until they're at least 10 centimetres tall, maybe taller, slugs and snails are a really big problem. And yeah, you don't have long to act. Now, when is this going to be an issue? It is going to be an issue when it's wet and humid. So currently, winter, not summer. In summer, your slugs and snails, they're going to hibernate. They're going to be hanging out trying to preserve their moisture. They are not going to be interested in eating your crops. So during the warmer months or the really dry months, we are not going to have a slugs and snails issue, which is brilliant. But come kind of mid-autumn, when you get those first really heavy rains of autumn and then following through into winter, that is when you absolutely will start seeing them, and they can reproduce like nobody's business. So you have to get on that. They lay eggs in the soil. They can even reproduce. Some types of snails and slugs can reproduce without a partner. So
What?
they're just going for it. They see the soil's moist, they get the time is right, and you're going to have baby snails left, right and centre if you don't get on top of it. I'm making it seem like it's an apocalypse. It's not.
It does seem like it's an apocalypse.
Well, most of the time it's not an apocalypse, but for the occasional situation, I've had it once myself, it really was an apocalypse. So you need some techniques up your sleeve.
The early warning signs, will it just be the leaves are being chomped a bit? Is that what we're looking out for?
Yep, exactly.
And does it matter the type? Are we going to deal with all slugs and snails exactly the same way, or do we need to worry about what particular type of slug or snail that it is?
Good question. No, generic slugs and snails discussion. They're all, I think they're called mollusks or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's like a slimy, sucky, crawly insect? I don't even know if it's an insect.
Well, it's something that's chomped your plants. This is how we're dealing with it.
Exactly. And it leaves a slimy trail.
Okay.
That's the common factor here, slimy trail. The other thing is when it leaves the slimy trail, it actually leaves moisture behind, which is why in summer it's not moving very fast because it doesn't want to lose, it needs to preserve its moisture. So again, we love the summer because slugs and snails aren't around, but as you've experienced, Tess, that's when the caterpillars are happy. So is always something to deal with in the garden. As much as I say it is a slug and snail apocalypse, there actually is a lot of different ways to manage them, and they're all pretty effective, and most of them are 100% natural. So
Okay, great.
it isn't that big of a deal as long as you know what the signs are, and when you see them, you act and you do something from our list. The
Okay.
list is extensive. Shall we crack on with it?
Let's crack on with the list. Just a preliminary question. Would you recommend having something in the shed or the cupboard
Yes.
ready to go? Like sort out your solution before you have the problem?
Yeah, bang on.
Okay, so then when you do see a problem, you don't have to worry about waiting until the weekend to pop to the hardware store or the nursery or whatever. You're just ready to go. Okay, hit me with the list.
I would say that. And there are a lot of pests that I'd say you're going to see early warning signs and you're going to have, weeks to deal with it, kind of get on top of it. Those ones, I would say, don't worry about having like a preconceived or, pre-planned solution for that. Work on it if and when you get to it. Slugs and snails, probably everyone at some stage is going to have to deal with them. And as I said, do it quick. So yeah, this would be the one pest, the only pest I would say have a plan for.
Okay, what are our options?
Okay, many. The first one I know that you have had fun with at times. This is the manual removal. This is I see a slug, I see a snail, I pick it up and I kill it, or otherwise dispose of it.
Yes, I have had experience with that.
This is very effective in a small garden. So someone like you, Tess, you could get away with this. My size garden, I am going to be out there.
It would be a full-time job.
It would be a full-time job. So, for a small patch, for a backyard garden, I would say give that a go. It's going to be very effective. It's going to be easy. It's natural. Gets the job done. Nighttime is when they're all up and about. I don't actually know why, but trust me on that. You will see some during the day, but lo and behold, most are going to be out at night. So head out there with your head torch. I have a head torch. I love it for gardening. It's brilliant. Get out there with your head torch, collect them, get rid of them.
Okay, and if you wanted to be proactive in terms of getting out in the evenings and having a look around, looking around plants or looking around everywhere?
The plants.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there will be some just hanging out in other spots, but look at the plants, or at least right around the plants. And they're not, they're quite big. Like we all know what a garden snail looks like. So it's not like something like caterpillar eggs, which are tiny on the back of leaves that you've really got to search for. Like if there's a slug on your seedling, you are going to see it from a mile away. So give it a look around the area, and anything you've got, get rid of it.
Okay, so that's option one,
Option
the
one.
manual removal.
Small gardens and small infestations, I would say good option. If you've got a massive infestation, they've probably already laid eggs, so that's going to be a bit difficult. So early stages, manual removal. Moving on from that, probably the most common way to control them is snail and slug pellets. Now, I do use these sometimes, but I am cautious about it. Anytime you're introducing any kind of pest control or chemical in your garden, you're asking for trouble, even in the sense that, that's going to impact on the ecosystem in the soil, which could impact on your worms. And we've spent so much time looking after our little worms. So I would say only resort to pellets if you are experiencing severe decimation at the hands of the slugs and snails. When looking at pellets, there are a few different types, and the different types use different active ingredients to kill the slugs and snails. And the one that's the most environmentally friendly and the least dangerous is the iron-based pellet.
Okay.
These are often like a reddy brown colour, and often they say on it, safe for use around cats and dogs, that kind of thing. So these ones, they say that if, a cat or a dog or other mammal consumed them, it would be safe. But obviously any kind of chemical consumed in great amounts is going to be problematic, but they definitely are a lot safer than the blue and the green coloured pellets, which have different active ingredients. So if you're going to use them, go for iron-based ones, safe around cats and dogs. I'm hoping that we don't get to that, so maybe I should have listed that one last. But
Okay, so that's the last resort. So we've done the first and the last resort.
I've actually got it's actually the second last resort. I've got another last resort, but okay, we've got the first resort is the manual. The second last resort is the pellets, and now in between we've got quite a few options, all of which are totally safe and very environmentally friendly. So the third option is my favourite. Not going to work for many of you listening, but this is ducks and chickens. Ducks and chickens love slugs and snails. It's like a protein sandwich for them. They will murder a snail like nobody's business. Like
it's very French of them.
It is very French of them. They will smash the shell with their beaks. Like, it's horrendous to see, but it is incredibly effective. And I noticed that my veggies and my plants grown in the vicinity of the chickens have much less damage to them than the plants in my greenhouse, which are never available to chickens. So slugs and snails can go hang out in my greenhouse and they have no risk of a chicken attacking them. So, again, it's not going to be, I would not recommend anyone who does not want or have ducks or chickens to be going and investing in them. But if you do, it would be really wise to have your ducks and chickens access around your veggie patch.
Yeah, and that's your setup, is that your chickens are in with a bunch of your planting beds as well. So that's something I think, don't just rush out and get a chicken is perhaps what I'm thinking here.
Definitely do not rush out and get a chicken. But if you do have a chicken, or you're thinking you would never have one chicken, that would be very sad for the chicken. If you had chickens or ducks, and you're planning your setup for your garden, it is really wise to do what I've done and have those birds accessing either around your veggie beds or very close to your veggie beds. They're not, in my setup, they're not going to be in the garden bed picking the slugs off the seedlings, because frankly the chickens would also eat the seedlings. But by having the chickens accessing around the veggie beds,
they do enough.
They're going to do a really good job of just keeping the population low. And again, having had the greenhouse, which is a separate kind of place I grow food, I have noticed a really big difference with my slugs and snail problem just by separating them from the chickens. Now, as I said, I'm never going to endorse anyone to get a chicken or a duck to deal with their slug problem, but you can use this principle and encourage birds into your garden. So any bird, I think any bird would very much dine out on a slug and a snail. So having something like a bird bath in your garden, or some kind of like bird box, these kind of things will encourage birds to come in, and hopefully when they enter the garden, they'll have a slug and snail for their dinner or their dessert that evening.
Yeah, good one.
So that's a good way to do it. The other natural predator is lizards, and blue tongues in particular, I've heard, are a big fan of snails. Now, I don't think I have any blue tongues in my garden.
I don't think I've got any blue tongues in my garden.
No, probably not. But if you're listening to this and you've got some kind of lizard population, especially blue tongues, brilliant. Encourage them and, get them to come into the veggie garden. I've even heard someone say that they hand feed their wild lizards with snails. So I had a gardening teacher a few years ago, Justin Calvary from Ceres, and he always said, you don't have a slug and snail problem, you've got a lack of duck problem. Yeah. And his point is, and it's so applicable to pretty much everything in the garden, is given that we're working with an ecosystem and we're working with like a whole environment at the same time, you can't look at one problem in isolation because it all links together.
Yeah, it's circle of life stuff.
Exactly. So, if you've got an overgrowth of slugs, it's like, okay, well then, or like an overpopulation of slugs, it's like, what am I missing from my environment that would keep that population down? And I think often it's birds, whether it be pet birds like your ducks and your chickens, or your wild birds or your lizards. So think about the nature aspect and how we can use the animals.
Of those three predator options of chickens, lizards and birds, probably birds is the most accessible to the wider audience.
I would say so. Definitely.
Going out and getting a blue tongue lizard to deal with your slug problem might not be the solution.
No, I would never say anyone should go get one of these.
But how easy is it to get a bird bath?
You get them from the nursery.
Yeah, so easy.
Exactly. Yeah, and look, they look really pretty. And even I have a few bird baths around, and I just from a looking after the birds perspective, quite like having them there in summer as a way for animals to drink. So yeah, get a bird bath.
Great one.
Yeah, you might regret this in summer when the birds are eating your tomatoes, but we'll deal with that in a different episode.
Next to summer.
At the moment in the garden, I doubt much of what you're growing is going to be food for birds. So
okay,
don't worry.
But that is still something to think about as well. If you start seeing that your crops are being decimated by birds rather than...
Then we've got a different issue.
Yeah. But back to slugs and snails.
It's never a dull moment in the garden. You've got your animals in there. Next, and this is probably the most common option and a good one, is traps.
Traps?
So traps are... There's two options for traps. First one is citrus peel. So say you get an orange and you juice it, then you've got the rind that's hollowed out. Put that upside down in your garden and the slugs and snails are attracted to it. They'll then crawl into that citrus shell, for want of a better word. Mm-hmm. It's not going to kill them. You'll then need to go around the garden and remove these citrus rinds and remove the slugs and snails with them. But it's basically just a way of getting them all away from your seedlings in the same spot, so it's easy for you to do your manual removal.
And you just pop it on the soil?
Yeah, just on the soil.
Easy.
I have never used this one, I'll be honest, but I do know a lot of people really swear by it. So I would say definitely give it a crack. And if you're someone that juices oranges or like has, peels in the kitchen, why not take them outside and chuck them in the garden bed?
Any citrus? Can we do lemons as well?
Yeah, any citrus.
Okay.
Well, I mainly hear of it from grapefruit and oranges. So I do wonder if the sweetness is more appealing.
It's something that's important, yeah.
But I mean, try it with a lemon. Again, everyone's got lemons that they're using in the kitchen.
And it can't
so why
hurt
not?
to give it a shot.
Can't hurt. The second trap is a little bit more effective in some ways because it will actually kill them as well as trapping them. And this is a beer trap. This is a really common gardening technique. Basically what it is you take a saucer or a shallow plastic container, something like that, and you bury it in the soil and you fill it with about 1 centimetre of beer. This attracts the slugs and snails to the beer. They slide along, crawl along the soil, fall into the beer trap, and I don't know if it's the drowning that kills them or they just like get so drunk on beer it kills them. I'm not sure. But this will kill them.
So you're creating like a trough of beer,
Yeah.
like a swimming pool of beer.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mini swimming pool of beer in your veggie patch. And you would often do this around, like in your raised garden beds, Tess, you would do this actually in the garden bed.
Okay.
So you've got the slugs and snails coming to the garden bed and then you have, the swimming pool that they drown in.
God, it is grim.
It is grim, but I will say I have used this one before. It is very effective. The problem with it, if there is a problem, is that you've got to empty it regularly because, like, you don't want these, like, festering dead slugs hanging around. So especially when the weather gets warmer, like, don't leave it weeks to empty. And conversely, you also need to empty it and fill it back up with beer. So you've got to refresh the swimming pool.
Which, if you have beer drinkers in your household, it might be
Just give a little slosh. Yeah. One for you and one for the slugs. People always joke this is like a really humane way to kill them because, like, who wouldn't want to, like, die
in a swimming pool of beer.
Exactly. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll run with it. You can also buy these little plastic things that look like gazebos, like mini gazebos, like a swimming pool with a covering, a shade cloth. Yeah. Now, these make it easy. I mean, they're basically the same as any other like saucer or plastic container you're bearing, but they've got a little roof over them. This is where the gazebo comes in. And this is so that when it rains, which frankly in winter it's doing a lot of, it's not filling up with water. Because once the thing fills up with water and overflows, like it's not going to be
as effective.
So by having the little roof on it, that'll keep the beer nice and beery. It's got a little entrance for the slugs to get in. They get in, they can't get out.
God, it sounds lush.
They're cheap. Any kind of like garden supply store online or whatever will have these like little traps. But any kind of plastic container that you've got, your takeaway food in or, your deli, your olives from the deli, anything like that, that will do just as good of a job if you, one, don't want to buy something and two, just reuse some plastic you've already got.
And would a glass jar, I'm just trying to think of like the kind of like waste I have in my kitchen if I have like
like a feta jar.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's probably a little bit deeper than what I've seen, but no, I think that would be perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, so just dig a
trial and
little
error,
hole.
like,
Dig a little hole and whack it in there and see if you catch any. I mean, obviously, if you've got none in the garden, you've got none to catch, but we're only going to be doing these if we know we've got a problem. So that's the trap option. And then the last option, which I think actually probably...
So just to, the scale again is manual collecting first, and then options in the middle are the predators and the traps. Then we've got pellets.
Yeah.
And then we've got one more extreme. Okay, hit us. What is it?
Well, I'm not there yet. I've got another option for you.
Jumping ahead.
You are. So in the same vein as the traps, maybe these are the most common things people do. This is called the barrier method. No, we're not talking about STDs, Tess.
Still an important conversation.
It's the same kind of principle. We put a barrier between the slugs and snails and our precious seedlings.
Works the way that you think a barrier would work.
Yeah, sums it up well. So these are quite effective as well and natural. A few different barriers we can run with. The first is copper. So you can actually buy bands of copper. It looks like a roll of like masking tape, and it's actually copper. You put this around your like the top of your pots or your raised garden beds, and the slugs and snails get a mild electric shock when they go over it.
Whoa,
So
okay.
it stops them getting into your raised beds. This only works if you are gardening in raised beds or pots. You can't really use this on the ground, but for someone like you, Tess, you are. So that would
putting
be
it
an
on
option.
the outside of the bed or like just inside the...
I think outside, like as they would
Okay.
come up the sides.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how you would do it because Tess's raised beds are kind of up against the back fence. So I don't know how, if you'd be able to get enough contact around the whole thing, but
Yeah.
we'll have a look at that. You need to set these up properly. Like if you have a space, like you can't just half do it, you know, like you've got to really get the whole perimeter happening. And, you know, it is a bit of effort. Obviously you've got to buy the copper and you've got to like secure it down even with nails or whatever. But if you're in it for the long haul, this is something you'll set up once and
Oh, that's good.
it'll always be there.
Yeah,
so,
great.
you know, season after season, that will be your slug and snail problem. So if you've got a bit of time and, you know, you're committed to the cause, I would 100% recommend that.
Mm-hmm.
I have the copper tape and I've used it a few garden beds, but given the amount that I have, I haven't gone around and thoroughly done it all. But Frank, now I'm thinking about it out loud, maybe in my greenhouse that would be a good move for some of my garden beds because, as I said, in the main garden, I don't have that much of an issue, but in the greenhouse, I definitely do. So I might look into that. The next barrier method is the eggshell sprinkle. So this is when you get eggshells, crush them up so they're like little sharp bits and just sprinkle them around your seedlings. So the slugs and snails don't like crawling over the sharp, spiky bits and pieces in the soil. So they will stay away. So that's, I mean, if you eat eggs, that's a brilliant option because what are you doing with your eggshells? You're either putting them in the compost or...
And they'll just compost away anyway.
Well, exactly.
Eventually, if you sprinkle them around your seeds.
Bang on. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that one. And I do use that one quite a bit and I find it very effective. And actually, I find even in my compost, I often have broken up eggshells. And then I find when I put compost on the garden beds, like it's not really enough to say that if you had a slugs and snails massacre, you know, decimation situation, that would be enough. But I do find even just that small amount that's kind of scattered throughout my garden beds naturally, I think also makes a difference to the populations. Well, sorry, it won't make a difference to the populations, but it'll keep them off the places that you want them off.
Yeah, and that's the battle here is
Yeah.
just keeping the seedlings until they're at that
Exactly.
growth level that they'll survive on their own.
Exactly. And if you're harvesting a bit of silver beet that's had a chomp taken out of it, you don't care.
No.
It's just that you want the seedling to get to that point.
Yes.
The next thing you can use for the barrier is diatomaceous earth. And I've mentioned this for the caterpillars as well. This is a really fine shell dust that you can sprinkle around the garden and also actually on the plant itself. And the slugs and snails, again, don't like crawling over it. It's sharp. This I find very effective in summer. I find it very ineffective in winter because the rain will wash it away.
Yeah, right.
So given that snails and slugs are most prevalent in those, you know, when it's wet, I don't think this is a great option. But if for some reason, I don't know, it's dry and you're finding them around, maybe try that. But I do prefer that as the my main method of dealing with caterpillars. The last thing you can sprinkle around as a kind of a barrier method is coffee grounds.
Ah.
Yeah, so if you have a coffee machine at home or you go to the coffee shop, often like I'll ask my local coffee shop, can I have a bag of the grounds when they're done? And they've got more coffee grounds than they know what to do with at the end of the day. So they're usually more than happy to hand them over to me. Sprinkle those around your seedlings.
Yeah, good one.
I think it's the caffeine in the coffee grounds that the slugs and snails don't like rather than the texture, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I find that really effective. I do it myself. It's really easy. It's a free resource that's otherwise being wasted. And you can compost coffee grounds anyway. So kind of like with your eggshells, sprinkling them on your garden, by sprinkling coffee on the garden, it's just going to compost into your soil. You can coffee grounds will make your soil more acidic, which we haven't discussed, and for beginner gardeners, don't worry about this, but we'll talk about it one day. I would just say I wouldn't be going ham on the coffee grounds and getting a bag of coffee grounds every second day from the roaster and sprinkling it around. You might alter kind of that happy ecosystem of your soil, but small amounts, and frankly enough to keep slugs and snails at bay in, you know, start of winter, early autumn, late autumn, totally fine. So that's the other barrier method. And I would say that kind of sits in the traps section of, you know, the hierarchy of what we're going to use to deal with it. I find them very effective, actually. Like,
Okay.
It's definitely
I
worth
think
a
that
shot.
the coffee grinds and the eggshells both sound like a great solution because it's something that I have on hand anyway, and I'm just putting them in my compost bin. So
exactly.
how great just to repurpose them.
Yeah, exactly. And like effort very low. Like literally you've got them anyway, as you say, just break them up, sprinkle them around, Bob's your uncle. So yeah, I think that would probably be my favourite too.
I like it.
Yeah. So last option, and this is your last option as far as a gardener, when all else has failed and things are going that bad, you can get sprays, like pesticide sprays specifically for slugs and snails, and you would actually spray each individual seedling with this spray, and the slugs and snails will leave it alone.
Okay.
I don't like this for multiple reasons. One, we're planning on eating these plants, so we don't really want to spray them. Two, it's actually really quite a lot of effort because you have to spray every leaf of every single seedling. So it works on contact. So if you're only spraying half the plant, it's not going to do the job.
Okay.
So again, I wouldn't say it's my go-to, but if things are that dire, give it a go. And I will also say, like, you know, say you're spraying your broccoli that's 5 centimetres tall, like it's going to be weeks, if not months, before you're harvesting anything off that plant. So it's not like you're spraying it continuously throughout its whole life. So I'm, you know, from a spray perspective, that would be like the lowest worry spray as far as I'm concerned. And you can get very natural forms of things that will deter the slugs and snails. This is not like chemical warfare we're talking about. But again, when we don't need to do that stuff, and frankly, it's a really time consuming option, I would say last resort.
If a plant has a few leaves that are taken by the slugs and snails, can it grow back, or should you pull it out and just get rid of it?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes it will grow back perfectly and there'll be no issues. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it's like, this is just too far gone, we can't come back from this. I find there's not like a hard and fast rule with this. Like I had this sprouting broccoli plant that had been absolutely demolished, and I thought there is zero chance of you coming back. Like it looked like a skeleton, and the thing came back perfectly.
Okay.
So
just leave it and see whether it will bring itself back to life?
I would say if there's nothing else you're busting chops to plant, just leave it.
Okay.
If you are desperate to get something in, or if the seasons are getting close to changing and you're thinking like, I don't have enough time for this plant to come back, like say it was a Brussels sprout and this is in like March, I'm going to say there's not enough time for that Brussels sprout plant to kind of come back from the damage and produce its, you know, edibles in the time that it needs to. So I'd say in that case, get it out.
One last thing that I will just mention is when we were talking about the iron pellets before, you mentioned briefly that there are other more toxic options. And I once was house and dog sitting, and we had an urgent trip to the vet with a dog that was a poor pooch that was vomiting blue. And it turned out he was fine in the end. And we called up the vet, and the vet said, not sure, just in case, bring the dog in. And it turned out it was probably most likely not a slug or snail pellet that he ingested. But that's, I mean, just such a huge reason to avoid those, I would say, that they are, you know, it's not even just domestic animals like cats and dogs that you might have in your house, but birds and other things that could be getting them. So
Possums,
I think we've discussed a heap of options that you can go to before you go to these more toxic options. So
there's really no reason to. And look, in some countries, they're actually phasing them out as being illegal. So, you know, I think, you know, in 10 years' time or however long, this actually won't even be an option for us. So we might as well just pretend it's an option for us now.
Yep, avoid at all costs.
There you go.
So the big question, is the juice worth the squeeze? This is where we look at the effort-reward ratio of today's topic. The categories are superstar, high effort, high reward. Completing this will make you feel like an absolute rock star. Best on ground, low effort, high reward. Quick wins and fill-ins, low effort, low reward. And finally, the wooden spoon, high effort, but not much reward.
So Tess, tell me, slugs and snails, is the juice worth the squeeze?
The obvious answer is that yes, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. This is one of those tasks that you don't have an immediate reward for.
No, it's not fun. There's no fun.
I mean, the fun is that you get to keep your plant alive.
Yeah, that is fun, yes.
So it's kind of like, I guess it's high reward, but it's not high reward when you're doing it. And the reward's not instantaneous, and you don't get like a delicious veggie at the end to. I mean, you do get a delicious veggie in the end, but you might, even if you don't have a snail infestation. So, and we've also discussed a bunch of different options that range from being quite low level, like the barriers that we spoke about, to higher level, like
Dusting
chickens.
your seedlings.
Chickens,
ducks,
dusting your seedlings, putting on the copper barrier around the end. So it really is, I think, choose your own adventure when it comes to where you are, what your snail and slug infestation is like, for how much effort that you need to put into this. I certainly will be going with a low effort option first.
And what do you think is the lowest effort option?
Definitely for me, it's the barrier option of coffee and eggshells.
Yeah.
Eggshells, as it seems like they affect the soil makeup.
There's no
chemical balance.
negative. Yeah.
So that seems great. Coffee, we have so much coffee. We're making coffee every day. So that's something that's always on hand, which is great. So those are probably what I would go with as the first, as my first port of call if I was.
I reckon that, and if you had to add another one, the beer trap, because you can do that with what you've got in your kitchen too.
Yes.
Or the citrus if you had it.
Yeah.
And when I said the coffee issue earlier, like with two people, like what you've got in a household, having one coffee a day, like you're not going to end up with like truckloads of coffee grounds in your soil.
No.
So I wouldn't worry about that. But yeah, no, I think you're totally right. They would be the easiest ones to start with no downside.
Definitely.
Which is really important. And look, I will say, despite the fact that slugs and snails, they're a real pain. At the same time, they're actually quite easy to deal with. Like, there are other pests in the garden that I couldn't give you a list of 10 really easy options, 8 of which are, super environmentally friendly. Like, so, as far as pests go, yeah, they're pervasive, but at the same time, we can easily deal with them without a whole lot of problems, a whole lot of time investment, and a whole lot of chemicals.
And it seems like at any point you can deal with them, but the key timing element is saving your seedlings.
Yeah.
That's why you want to be really prompt on when you see something, doing something about it, so that you can keep your little seedling alive.
Yeah, because there's nothing sadder than having grown a plant from a seed and it comes up as a seedling and then some snail just chomps it off. Like, that is heartbreaking stuff, guys, and we do not want that for you. So be on the lookout for damage before it gets that bad.
So I have put in a few, in early winter, I put in a few things of the salad mix seedlings. Salad mix seeds that I've put in. And they, I reckon, are probably about 1 centimetre now. Would you recommend going out and just like sprinkling coffee and eggshells over them now before I've even seen any kind of issue with?
Yeah, I would say, given how wet it is at the moment down here in Melbourne, Victoria, it's incredibly wet these last few weeks. I would, and especially because you got them there anyway, so what else are you going to do with them? Put them in the compost. Yeah, I would.
Okay,
and
great one.
Worst case, there'll be a soil conditioner.
Okay, fantastic. Rooting For You is hosted by Alyce and Tess. You can find us on Instagram @rootingforyoupod or email rootingforyou@alycealexandra.com.